Morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition in our webinar series. In this session, we'll be exploring a much underused piece of functionality within Qlik Sense, and that's the layout container. So on the session today, you have myself, Neil Thorne. I'm Head of Origination at Ometis, and I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Tom Mitchell, who's one of our Qlik consultants. Tom's making his Ometis webinar debut today, so yeah, please be gentle. I'm joking, of course. Tom has worked with several of you on the call, and I was pleased to be able to get a hold of him to demonstrate today. He's a man much in demand. Right, so today's agenda. I shall be providing the introductions and some positioning, and I'll then hand over to Tom, and he'll take you through the demonstration and some thoughts on visual best practices and pros and cons of using the layout container. We will finish with a Q&A and expect the session to last around 45 minutes, depending on questions. So before we start, just a little housekeeping. The session is being recorded and will be loaded onto our website and our YouTube channel a little later in the week. During the session, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A facility. If I think it will add to the discussion at the time, I'll interrupt Tom. Otherwise, I'll leave them for the Q&A session at the end. And during that Q&A session, please feel free to raise your hand if you'd like us to turn your microphone off if you want to ask a question. So I'm conscious there's a few of you on the call that may not be aware of Ometis. So we are the UK's largest dedicated Qlik partner, and last year we were #1 partner in the UK. We're also a Snowflake partner, and all of our consultants are Qlik qualified in various areas. We have over 25 staff serving over 225 customers across the whole of the Qlik platform, from data integration through to analytics. We are a one-stop shop for Qlik licenses and added value services, as I've shown there, such as Qlik consultancy and development. But we also have a dedicated support desk that enables you to talk to one of our team about your issue. We have an education and learning team that provide instructor-led Qlik training courses in an online classroom. So do get in touch if you want to talk about any of those bottom 4 things in particular. So I bring this slide up at each of these sessions so that you can see which element of the Qlik platform we are covering, but also to show you the breadth of that platform. You know, most of you on the call use the analytics elements of Qlik, these elements in green. But you know, are you aware that the talent acquisition enables data integration, governance, quality, near real-time change data capture for those that need more frequent updates? So yeah, it's all there. So do get in touch if you want to learn more. But now I'm going to hand you over to Tom, and he's going to take you through the rest of the session. Enjoy.
Thanks, Neil. I'm just going to switch my screen, so hopefully everyone can see that. Can you see that, Neil?
Sorry, bear with me a second. I'm struggling myself. Yes, I can.
Yep, perfect. Right, thank you everyone for joining. So to start off, the layout container, just going to go through a few slides, some examples of some visual best practices, stuff that you'll want to bear in mind, and then we'll jump into the actual Qlik demo itself. So a few points on this slide, mainly that if anyone is used to Qlik View, the layout container does bring back some of the freedom of design that you may have been used to with that tool. It's less forced grid and more the ability to, be pixel perfect or make the grid as big or as small as you want to, and position it anywhere within that specific area that you've outlined, really. So it's nice to see that coming back. So for some visual best practices, these are things that you'll want to kind of bear in mind going forward with the layout container, because it gives you so much freedom. You are at risk, whether deliberately or accidentally, forgetting about some of these things. The grid of Qlik Sense that we're used to by default is nice in that it forces you to kind of adhere to some of these without having to put much thought into it. So I'll just cover these briefly just to make sure that they're fresh in the mind. So on the right here, we have a screenshot that I've taken, just a random report that I found online on the internet. And it maybe doesn't employ all of the best practices that we're going to discuss as well as it maybe could. So the first one is the 7 ± 2 objects. So this is kind of similar to Miller's law, which is all about what the humans can kind of store in memory, like what you can remember at one time. And when you have too many objects on the screen, it can become obviously information overload, but it's just, you look at it and you go, what is this trying to tell me? You know, what message am I supposed to be getting from this? And it takes you a while to break it down and understand it. Grid and text alignment. So this is a big one, especially on our example on the right here. The default that I would recommend is going for maybe 8 or 12 columns in your design, maybe if you're doing a wireframe before you actually build it. And it's making sure that you get neat fractions of that. So, you know, maybe you have a half and then you have a quarter, a third. It makes for a more natural flow in your chart. And on this one, for example, you can see that some are a quarter, some are a third within the same kind of column. And it looks a little bit disjointed. And similar with text alignment, if you're going to go left aligned, try and stick with left aligned. If you switch between center, left and right, again, it can look a little bit messy and can become a little bit confusing. Chart junk. So this is what we want to avoid where possible. And what I mean by chart junk is the value labels. Again, for example, in the bottom left of this screen, we see a line chart. There's a lot of lines on there. And when you add value labels, it's very hard to tell which, you know, where those values belong. What is that trying to tell me? What am I supposed to be seeing here? And maybe access labels. Can you title the object or the chart in a way that makes access labels irrelevant? You know, do you need both sets? That kind of thing. White space. White space can be a good thing. You don't have to fill every possible part on the screen. You know, it can make for real clear divisions between areas that you're trying to separate within one sheet. And it can help avoid that information overload that I mentioned earlier. And then finally, color usage. So really, like, give a thought to color usage. The main thing really is to stay consistent with it. So for example, on this one that we have on the right here, the light blue color on one chart is local authority, on another is Blackburn, and on another is Lancashire 12. And, you know, for a user to see that, and, you know, they see that with their eye, they quickly go, oh, does that mean, no, okay, that's something different. And it just adds a little bit of extra confusion there. So these are all things just to bear in mind. When you're going to use the layout container, don't forget about them. And then before we jump into the demo, just some pros and cons. How can the layout container help you? So no example, no demo of a feature would be complete really without a fair or a balanced feedback. So this is stuff from my experience. There are pros, but there are also some things to be aware of that might not be, that might catch you out or might not be so good. So start off with the pros. As I mentioned before, enables the free layout of charts. It can allow visualization to be stacked. So it has layers within it. It improves the avoidance of chart junk. And it can allow grouping of objects. So I think maybe a navigation pane or a filter, like a row of filter buttons, you can group those up and you can then copy the layout object across sheets. So that can improve the reusability of objects there, save you some time. But some cons, just some things to be aware of. With this very fine level of detail, it will soak up more of your development time. So to get maybe the same kind of visualizations on there with the default Qlik Sense versus using this layout container, you are looking at more time to achieve maybe the same insight. The more objects you add as well, the longer it will take to load. So for the user for it to render on their screen, if you add, hundreds on there, you're gonna feel it. So definitely be cautious of that. There is no hard limit that we're aware of, but don't maybe push it too hard. And then it definitely has a higher learning curve than other Qlik Sense objects. So I don't know if you have used the container object, the original one, that you kind of drag onto the screen and you maybe pop an object onto a couple of tabs and it's fine. This one, there's definitely a lot more features available, and to get used to it, how to develop with it is definitely higher than the other ones that we can use already. Okay, so now onto the Qlik Sense demo itself. So here is a UK housing dashboard. So this is using data that I've pulled from, I think it's gov.uk or data.gov. I think UK, the housing data is quite a standard free data set to use. This is from 2018 to November 2023, so it's not a completely up to date. I think there is a lag on the data that they make available on there, so don't read too much into the insights that it may be showing. It's just for demonstration. So what you can see on screen is almost a collection of use cases or examples of how we can use the layout container. So I have pre-prepared this one rather than building it from scratch, just to make sure we can demo as much of that as possible. And the one that I want to focus on to start with is this KPI in the top left here, and the total sales volume 2023. So this is focusing on, this is a section, group section, focusing on the latest year that we have available in the data. And this KPI is looking quite lonely. So, and it's without context. So to maybe add some context, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look to add a line chart to that. It will support it. It will give it context, so you know how the year has gone over time. And so to do that, we just open up the standard edit sheet. I like to do it in advanced mode as opposed to having it toggled off. And once we select this layout container here, you'll notice on the right hand side, similar to another container, the standard container, you'll have different content objects down the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click add, and I'm going to insert a line chart. And something to note while we're here that's different to what you may be used to is you can't drag and drop an object from the left hand side into that container. So maybe normally you would click and drag something across. That will try and replace the layout container itself. So what we do have to do is add it from this side. One of the things that to get used to with the layout container. Right, so we've now got our line chart. So we want to edit it, we want to add some data to it, customize it. So once we have the line chart on the right hand side, we do have to make sure that we click on it and we edit properties. Again, this is another one of those learning curve pieces. You would maybe normally just click on it and start, click off of it, click on again. You might just start editing, like you could go into appearance and then you realize actually you're editing the layout container. So make sure, and this will probably catch you out a few times, but select the object that you want and edit properties first and then start changing stuff. So I'm going to add some data first. So we want this by date, and we want sales volume, sum of, and because this is a grouping of the latest year, going to add some set analysis in here. Let's go for year. And we want year equals max. Yeah. Okay. Miss the equals off of that. There we go. Now it's saying 2023. So now we've got our 2023 line chart. It's looking very, very different, very standout. So the first thing we're going to want to do is start to apply some styling. So we go for an area, no scroll bar. We want it to be very minimalist. So no titles either. We want it to be consistent color. I am whizzing through this, but this is stuff that hopefully you've seen before and isn't specific to the layout container. We want to remove the labels and the titles, getting rid of some of that chart junk. Okay, that's all looking good. And we want to add a background color. And to do that, we should actually, I'll tell you what, in case anybody hasn't seen it, you can copy and paste styles now. So I'll just quickly show that because that will quickly grab the background color for me. So if you go onto any other object that you might have, right click on it, you can copy style as an option, and then right click on the one that you want to apply it to and hit paste. Notice now that the background color matches. So rather than go onto that chart, find the background color, whether it's a hexadecimal, RGB, copy that across. It saves you some time. It's a really nice addition. And then if we position that roughly in the area that we want, kind of size we want in like something like that. And just work on the alignment. You notice that there is some snapping going on. This just helps you align it with the other objects within your layout container, keeping that consistent. Okay, and then what you might notice is that you can't actually see the KPI. And that is because the way in the order in which we have these chart objects within the layout container dictates the layer in which they are presented. So similar to maybe if you used to Word, where you right click on something and send to background or bring forwards. If you just slide this down, so we want KPI to be showing in front of the line chart. Now we've slid that down there, and now it shows on top of it, which is achieving more of what we want. And then if I just move that up slightly, okay. And then I think we could do with maybe making that bar a little bit thicker. Okay, that's not too bad. Okay, and now what we have is a line chart behind a KPI. So we've grouped two objects together, one supporting the other in that we have a end of year summary value, and we also have a right, how did that perform within the year? Obviously there are some ups and downs before it ended roughly at a similar level to where it started. And that is kind of how you would look to group objects together. See, there are some other ways we can do it, and I have some of those on screen already. You might have noticed. We have the drop down. So, for example, in the index average index price by dwelling type, we have our bar chart here. We also have a drop down that's on top of that bar chart, a title and a button, all within one grouping here. So, you know, this fully works. You can go between 2019 all the options. And I don't know about you guys, but I personally, before I started making this demo app, wasn't aware of what index price was. So I thought, oh, that's a good opportunity. We can use the layout container to show and hide a help button or an information button. So if we click on the information button, we can have a pop-up appear that explains to the user what something means. In this case, I put index price. Click it again and it disappears. Maybe another use case is we can start to look at annotation on charts. Obviously, annotation can be quite specific to a particular view, which is maybe why it hasn't been used so much in the past. But now where we can use show and hide conditions within a layout container, we can make better use of that. So if you notice on the average price by region chart in the bottom right, if I change this to flat, you'll notice that one of my annotations that I've added, it now appears because I've said when the chart is set to flat, and when it is set to no country selected, show the text box and the various lines that are there that make up that annotation. So again, when we select, a user selects something else, that annotation is no longer relevant, the hide condition comes into play and it goes away. So another cool feature that we can do with it. And then the final example that I had of use cases on this demo, if we were to select a filter, a value to filter down the data set, and we, several customers have reset buttons on their sheets, on their apps. We can now layer a transparent button over the top of an image. That image may be in a text box, and that can allow us, if you don't like the icons that the default button provides, which is what this eye was, this is an icon default within Qlik. We've got this icon here, this image here, sorry, that we've added in, overlaid a transparent button over it, and we can set that to clear selections. So you can do that with it as well, which I'm personally looking forward to using more of. In terms of the layout container itself, you do want to make sure, as I mentioned before, that you click into this, you double click to get the grid at the back. There is some customizations for that. One of the cool features is the keep chart inside. So you can toggle that on or off. And if you were to toggle it off, you can do things such as, actually, let me do it on this one. Say, for example, you wanted to maybe hide the countries down the left-hand side of this bar. You could toggle that to off on the keep chart inside, and you could slide that across, play around with the positioning, for example, and potentially use that to hide some stuff that's part of the chart that you can't necessarily get rid of, but use this in a way in which it allows you to do that. You can play around with the number of rows and columns, so you can be really precise with how you want your grid to work, and how minute you want your detail of positioning to be. It also helps with resizing, so on different screens. So your users may have a full 1080p monitor, and then another user may be working on a laptop that's got some zoom on it or slightly lower resolution. Having your rows and columns configured would definitely help with the scaling of the responsiveness of that scaling. You can also hide the grid lines, so you can avoid them altogether. I wouldn't recommend it because it is only there for when you're developing, and it really helps you get that alignment to a good quality. So I would recommend to keep that on. And then you can also snap charts to grid. So this is more like the standard Qlik that you may be used to, in that it's moving. I can't move it to the middle of a grid. It's to a row. Sorry, it's forced to go to that. Whereas with this, I can now move it to wherever I want within there. I don't think there has any special styling options. You can add obviously background color to this. So not only can you do it to your sheet, you can do it to the layout container as well. So you can add a background color or add a background image. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the demo. I'll just hop back over to the slides. Should be that one. Just got a bit of a summary. So what we've covered in terms of capabilities. So it enables the free layout of charts, i.e. the fact that you can drag it around, position it anywhere without being limited to a grid. The ability to stack the visualizations, using those layers to put them on top of each other or behind, or to slightly clip over. We can use that to combine new charts into new visualizations. So I didn't show it there, but I've seen some cool uses of it where you can maybe have a ring, a donut. Where you have a pie chart, you can make it as a donut chart, and then you can put a pie chart within that. So you can almost have two separate insights within the same, because it's proportionally the pie actually goes out and meets both. So that's a really nice one that it could be used for as well. And then we also have the multi-select and group objects for easier sizing, positioning, alignment. So that, as an example of that, maybe you want to make a hierarchy of sorts. Maybe you have some KPIs. So in the use case of sticking with the housing one, maybe you have the UK at the top, and then you'd have hierarchical lines coming down. You'd have England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland as kind of split out, drill down versions of that. You can have that on one thing, highlight it all, highlight and drag, and then move it around as one object. I see if I don't have that available here, but once we select inside the layout container, you can notice if you click and hold your left mouse button, you can click and drag. So maybe this one here, there's two together. They're both highlighted now. I can move them around together. It's really nice quality of life feature. Onto features, so things we covered, show condition, so show and hide. You can add that for each object within your layout container. Grid lines, keeping charts within the bounds or not, depending on your use case. Percentage based on the X and Y positions. So not only can you look at, if we go for, let's try this one. Not only can you set the position, the width and the height as a percentage, you can also do the X-axis and Y-axis. So you can get really precise with it. You don't have to necessarily click the object and drag it. You can set it via a percentage-based position as well. So another option there. Yep.
Just to interrupt, so we've had a question which I think is relevant to this bit you're on about now. So
sure.
Gordon's asking, how does the container scale when the screen is stretched and squashed, say for a phone layout? Can the components float to fit the new size, or do parts get truncated when the container is too small for the contents?
So it will be similar to how Qlik works as standard in its responsive behavior. So when the space that it's got to work with is smaller, it will use that responsive behavior as it normally does to scale that down. So you will notice, for example, if it gets too small, maybe the axis labels drop off, or the bars shrink, the gaps between them close together, like very standard Qlik Sense behavior. That's one of the high learning curve pieces, I would say, is when you are designing it, you do want to make sure that you make your grid, the number of rows and the number of columns, to a good kind of proportion, so that when it does scale, it helps. I have done this where I've not paid much attention to the number of rows and columns, and the sizing, it can scale down funny, doesn't look quite right. So the more effort you put into making sure that the number of rows and columns are creating you a good grid, and your percentages are set up at a decent in a decent way, it will scale better. So you can experience different results there, but it will scale in the normal Qlik way. You will lose some features the smaller the screen gets, and you have more control over. You have more impact rather on how that looks once it has scaled down. So something to bear in mind, for sure. Okay, was that the only question, Neil, or should I continue?
There was another one, but we answered it earlier. So okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Sure, no worries. So customized background. Obviously, you can add that as you can with some other of the objects you may already be familiar with, and then borders and shadows. Again, nothing strictly new, but I think I did it with this button over here. You can kind of see I quickly added some shadow to the border of this so that it looks a bit more 3D. It looks as though it's popping off the screen a bit more. Maybe you wouldn't want to put it so it hovers over the drop down when it opens, but it was just an example of a position. And this app is, again, by no means perfect. This is just a demo of how you might bring together or use the layout container. The colors for one are quite bright, so maybe if I was going to do this again, I would maybe tweak the colors down a little bit, but they'd certainly pop off of a dark mode background quite nicely. But yeah, to add the shadow, sorry, is which one was it? I think it's going to be this one. Go into styling, and then it's just at the bottom, as with most of the objects in Qlik. You can have corner radius for the border, and you can have your shadow. So we can set that to different levels depending on what you need. And obviously, you can pick the color of the shadow as well, how much it blends in or pops off.
Sorry, we do have another question.
Yep, sure.
So Ali's asking, can we please tell about how to add a search button? So, for example, search a specific page or dashboard.
I'm not sure that we can add a search button, not as default Qlik. There may be extensions that do that, but none that come to mind. You have the search up at the top, which is like standard on every app, which allows you to search through the data, but nothing that allows you to search for a specific sheet. Unless I've misunderstood the question, please ask again if I've missed you there.
I've made one or two of the other guys present us so they can chip in if I've read that wrong. But there's also a question from Stuart, which I must admit I hadn't considered before, but I do quite like how it's looking. He's saying, is it good practice to use the black background?
So it's more a preference rather than a good practice. It's kind of playing on the more dark mode theme rather than the standard light mode that Qlik comes as default. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's a best practice. It really depends on your user's preference, on your preference. As long as you can see the content on the screen and it doesn't impede in that way, then it's definitely an option that you can go for if you want to. It takes a little bit more effort because it's not default, but it's not too much more.
Yeah, I quite like it, must admit.
Yeah, it's the first time I've used it.
So does Matt Phillip. He says he's inspired to try a dark mode edition of his apps. So yeah, there you go.
Definitely give it a go. I mean, it's a different experience because obviously you're starting with a darker color, and your colors are typically getting a bit brighter as they come forward and become more important. So darker at the back. Each container that we've grouped them into is a slightly lighter version. Whereas on a normal mode, you'd start with the lighter colors and it would slowly get darker. So
yes,
it's a different approach. it's quite refreshing actually. I've recently only just got glasses, and it's quite nice to not have a big white screen beaming out towards me. So
You
yeah,
just
give it
need
a
to
go.
change. You need to change your slides now, so they talk about black space, not white space. So that's
Yeah, true,
so
true, true.
Clive has asked, is it possible to switch between light and dark?
So I guess technically you could, as a, I've not tried it personally. I think with the background colors, it is an expression. So you could have a button with a variable set to it that would change the value, and then maybe the background color would react. Sometimes certain expressions don't always trigger the refresh necessary that would make that change. So it's definitely something that I'm keen to test now.
Yeah, right. Ryan's chipped in as well, so he's put a couple of ways you can achieve it. The one that you just talked about, creating a variable, but he's also saying, you know, or potentially you could create a theme for both light and
Yeah,
dark.
you would then have to be a developer to do that. So it's not, it would,
Yeah,
users wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. So obviously as a developer, I can change in the settings.
yeah,
Users won't have the ability to do this.
no,
So yeah, there are some options. It might not necessarily be as free flowing as maybe you thought in when you were hoping for when you asked the question, but
and then Gordon's come up with a good cost question. So
okay.
What happens when it's printed? Does it use up a lot of black ink?
I
Which,
mean,
yes,
I wouldn't
has to be the
recommend
answer.
printing it, to be honest,
No.
but probably uses, unless you're using a dark paper to begin with, probably uses a bit more.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, with this, you know, it's when did it come out? I think it was end of last year,
Yeah.
or
On
last
SAS.
quarter of last year on SAS.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those where we haven't seen it used really anywhere yet. So, and as Neil mentioned, it's underused. So hopefully this inspires you all to give it a go. Obviously, if you have time and where maybe business requirements allow, give it a go. See if it fits for you, and yeah, feel free to share. I'm really interested to see what other people do with it. So feel free to share what you've managed to achieve with it, because I know, especially us at Ometis, will be really interested to see how, you know, in the coming years people end up using this. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So
Ben, we've also, yeah, so Ben's just talking about, is the layout container usable for subscriptions and alerts to be distributed via emails on SAS?
again, not something I've tested. I would imagine you could. I'm not sure if it's maybe restricted to charts from here as opposed to custom objects, which is where the layout container lies, within custom objects.
That's our Ben asking that, so he can blooming well go and find out.
Yeah, no, I'll go and ask Ben after the webinar to test it and confirm.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, if it's not yet, I imagine it would be in the future.
Just conscious a little bit of time.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we did have some questions in advance from people. Is the layout container available in Qlik Sense Enterprise for Windows? Well, yes, it is, and it's from Feb 24 edition.
Yeah, came out in Feb 24. Yeah.
Yeah, SAS, I think it came out in sort of December time, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you covered this one actually. Is there a limit to the number of objects you can use in a layout container?
Yeah, so I did. I think I made reference to it earlier. So there is no hard limit, at least not one that Qlik have made available anywhere.
Right.
However, as mentioned, it will have to render all the things that you put in there, whether it's hidden or showing, it still has to load it. So you don't want to push it too far, and obviously the more complex your calculations within each of those objects, the worse it scales. But in theory, you could do hundreds, although we wouldn't probably recommend it. But.
Yeah, I understand. And then, yeah, it's an interesting one. Can the layout container be used in a standard container object?
So no is the short answer to that. The containers themselves are mutually exclusive, so you can't put one inside the other, because obviously one is
Right.
moving across tabs and one is layers. So yeah, they are mutually exclusive on that one. Which just quickly, just to show on screen, I won't necessarily read it out, but there are some other warnings / limitations to be aware of. So I'll just have those on screen for you. Were there any other questions, Neil? Or
yeah, there was one more. Matt's asking, can we find layout containers under charts as normal?
yeah, so those are under custom objects. So as with most of the new stuff that Qlik brings out that isn't part of its standard or original set of charts, they'll end up in this custom objects Qlik dashboard bundle section.
Yeah.
And you can also see there's the new text object in here. So instead of text and image, there's a new text object. This is where you'll find the variable input, which is what I've used for these drop downs.
Mm-hmm.
And also the layout container is in here. So yeah, that's where you'll find it in custom objects, not charts.
Okay. I think that's about your lot, mate.
Okay.
For questions. So could you just go to that next slide and just
yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry, no, you've got one more. Sorry,
I did have one more, but I think we've covered it. Just make sure when you are going to use the layout container, if you're not just practicing and seeing, what it can do, you don't necessarily have to use it for every app that you have now going forward. Yes, it does offer increased flexibility, but as we said, that it does come with additional development time, and whether you realize it or not at the time, it will soak up extra time. You can quite easily get lost in it. So in terms of when you might want to use the layout container, if you've got very busy dashboards where you're struggling to fit all your visualizations on, you can see as the Snowflake app that we demoed in our last webinar and the one that I've done here, we've broken the same sheet down into almost sections in its own right with the grouping. You can use the layout container to bring those together in quite a nice way and fit more on the screen without overloading the user.
Yeah.
The other use case that we would recommend is when obviously you have a need for high levels of control. Maybe you're producing a one-off exec report rather than something that users will go into and self-serve constantly. Maybe it's just a one-off and you want it to be almost like a website in terms of its positionally perfect everywhere, and it's not going to be interacted with very much. Maybe that's another good use case for it. But yeah, then it was on to question and answers, which we've already kind of done.
Yeah, there's the last one. Can you just
say one more slide?
More to the right?
Perfect.
Yeah,
there you go.
So this is my bit where I have to speak as quickly as I can because the number of attendees drops like a stone. So yeah, next steps. Do get in touch, please, if you want to know, more about Ometis generally, but also the topic we've discussed today. And please do suggest topics for future webinars. We're always looking to give you content that is of interest to you. So it's probably better if we do it that way. But also, read our blogs on the website. There's a lot of good stuff on there. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, but most of all, please follow us on LinkedIn, because that's what we're using these days for our up-to-date announcements on Qlik, Ometis, and all things data, including the links to any future webinars and blogs. So yeah, please do follow us on LinkedIn. That would help enormously. But lastly, yeah, thank you very much to everybody for attending. I hope you find it useful, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you.